Everyone, welcome so much to the Mental Health KC webinar today. We're so excited that you are joining us. I'm Jamie. I'm with Metro Council, and we're so happy that you're here today. Um, Welcome to Zoom webinar. So a little bit of information about Zoom webinar before we get started. So as you all probably notice, you are only able to see the presenter and myself, not your own self. That's because we're on Zoom webinar and that's how it works. But don't worry, you can still chat. You can still do the Q&A. You'll still be able to communicate in lots of ways, just not being able to see yourself or talk. Also letting you know that there is going to be a certificate of attendance. It'll be available at the end of our webinar today. And when I put the link and the password into the chat, please make sure that you copy and save it because what tends to happen now, because our webinars have become popular, and thank you guys, we appreciate that. That it kind of makes it so that it's not that the site crashes, but like it makes it so it becomes unavailable. So we ask that you please copy and save the link and especially the password, because what you can do is then just go in anytime throughout the day, today, tomorrow, and you can get that certificate. But if too many people come on at once, then it makes it unavailable. So just a little FYI before we get started. So with that, I wanted to tell you guys just a little bit about Metro Council, what we're doing, and then introduce Katie. So as I said, my name's Jamie. I'm with Metro Council. Just a little bit about Metro Council. So it's technically called Metropolitan Council of Community Mental Health Centers. It's a collaborative membership organization that represents the public mental health system of community behavioral health centers serving the greater Kansas City metro area. So that includes University Health Behavioral Health, Beacon Mental Health, um, Comprehensive Mental Health, which is about to be by a different name very soon. Rediscover Mental Health, Swope Health, Johnson County Mental Health Center, Wyandotte Behavioral Network, Center for Behavioral Medicine, and Mental Health America of the Heartland. And so we are so excited that you are here today. Metro Council, we provide support to our member organizations and education, information, resources on behavioral health. And I want you guys to please save the date because every May we have our Mental Health KC conference. Um, we hope that you will be able to be there for it. It is May 28th and 29th at Johnson County Community College. Save the dates save the dates are already out. Registration should be coming out next week. And we would love to see as many of you there as possible. And we really hope that you're able to attend. So as I said, save the date, May 28th, 29th. We're going to have over 80 different breakout sessions, two national keynote speakers, a ton of opportunities to get to know vendors and network. And great job. Great question, Ash. So it will be available next week. So anybody that has come to any of our webinars, to our conference, you are part of our distribution list. And so you'll be getting an email with the opportunity to sign up. And we highly recommend that you all sign up early because we have an early bird special that goes on actually until May. But so it's a pretty long early bird special, but we really hope that everybody will sign up before, to get that early bird special because we want everybody to be able to, we want to make it as affordable as possible. So we really hope that you're able to attend. The whole conference is only $60, which is an incredible price. It also includes lunch, snacks, and as I said, a ton of opportunities to hear from keynote speakers, from breakout speakers. And we really hope they're able to attend. And then the other thing we also want to promote, we are doing a fundraiser this year. It's the first time we've ever done a fundraiser. And it'll be April 23rd. It is called Comedy for a Cause. So we actually have two nationally known comedians that we are partnering with. And I guess they are known in the comedy club circuit. And it will be at Clint's Comedy Club. As I said, Thursday, April 23rd, from 6 to 7 is networking, and then they go on from 7 to about 9. So we really hope that you'll be able to attend. We only have 80 tickets available because that's all the space will hold. So first come, first serve in terms of tickets, and we hope you're able to make it. So with that, now it's time for me to introduce Katie. So I am so excited today that we have Katie Black. Katie Black um, is an executive function coach, social worker in training, and program director at Summit Ranch, which is a nonprofit supporting youth mental health and wellness. And she specializes in helping children and teens build tools for attention, regulation, and independence through strengths-based, neurodiversity-affirming strategies. With a background in education and extensive experience supporting ADHD, autism, and anxiety, Katie designs programs that bridge therapy, coaching, and real-world application. She regularly presents on executive functioning, neurodivergent affirming practices, and inclusive support for children and teens. So with that, I am so excited to introduce Katie, who's talking about rethinking noncompliance, a neurodiversity affirming lens for challenging behaviors in youth.
Thank you so much, Jamie. I'm going to try to share my screen. Okay. So there's a kid sitting in a school right now. Maybe it's your school. If you teach or you're a counselor, or you're an administrator, and they are doing absolutely everything right. Following directions, sitting quietly, getting good grades. And they are falling apart. You just can't see it yet. We're going to talk about that kid today, but we're also going to talk about the loud kid, the one who shoves the paper off the desk, the one who throws something across the room, maybe, and the one that the report constantly calls non-compliant. Because it turns out that these two kids are really dealing with the same thing a lot of the time. We just happen to respond to them in very, very different ways. So I want you to meet Sam. And I want you to meet Sam the way that a lot of the adults in Sam's life have met Sam, and that's through some kind of referral or incident report. So Sam is a student in fourth grade. Let's say it's morning time. Teacher gives an instruction. Start the worksheet. Sam doesn't move. Teacher gives the instruction again. Start the worksheet. Sam puts their head down. Teacher redirects a third time. Sam, start the worksheet. Sam responds by shoving the paper off the desk. So this report gets written. The boxes that are checked are non-compliant, defiant, and refuse to work. So the first thing I want us to do is I'm going to run that same scenario through 4 different tools. And these are the tools that are the most popular in school systems all around the country. And these are good intentioned, well-meaning tools. These tools were designed by smart people, widely implemented. I think I've used every single one of them on this list as a teacher. And we're going to watch what each one of these tools does with our friend Sam. So first, let's look at Sam through the PBIS lens. So under a PBIS token system, Sam loses a token for not starting the work, and then he loses recess for the paper shove. And Sam, by the end of the week, has found himself at the bottom tier of the class reward system. And when we look at the data, what the data says is that Sam now is in tier 2 and needs a check-in and check-out. And I want to pause for a moment to make one thing clear. I realized that this is not a great implementation of PBIS and what PBIS is supposed to be. But I want us very grounded in reality in this talk. And this is a lot like what PBS looks like, not PBS, PBIS looks like in many, many schools. If not the entire school, then a certain teacher. So an issue here is the system has a mechanism for asking about what happened to Sam, that check in, that check out, but the data drove the response before anybody's gotten curious. No one has asked Sam about his morning yet, but let's see if we can do a bit better. So let's look at Sam through the zones of regulation lens. So in zones of regulation, you're to ask the kid, okay, what zone are you in? So Sam shoves the paper. Sam, what zone are you in? And Sam says, green, because that's what gets people to stop talking to me. Or maybe Sam decides to be a little honest, like a lot of the kids I know, and says, I don't know. So they're prompted to look at the poster. Figure out what zone you're in. So Sam looks at the poster. Sam picks yellow because it seems safe. It's the middle ground. Sam's given a strategy card. Sam puts head back down. The data for that day says student was provided with regulation tools, but they didn't utilize them. But there's a gap here. Nobody's ever questioned whether Sam could actually feel what was happening in their body. So that can make zones pretty difficult. But let's go on. Let's look at Sam through the FBA lens, right? Our functional behavior specialist comes in, looks at the situation and says, the function of the paper shoving is an escape from task demands. Perfect. I would probably come to that type of conclusion too. So on Sam's behavior plan, they provide a break card. They teach Sam to request breaks. Sounds great. This is the kind of stuff I was doing last year. They tell the teacher, don't reinforce escape behavior. But when it happened, again, Sam doesn't use the break card. And that's because Sam's prefrontal cortex isn't home to think about using the break card. And the crisis has taken that brain offline. So now the data says student did not use replacement behavior. Only we didn't stop and think before we thought about what the behavior was for, what Sam was actually escaping from. So let's bring it together and look at Sam's morning again. Same kid, same morning. Didn't eat breakfast. Well, the texture of the oatmeal made them gag, but mom still made me take 2 bites. And it was really hard, and I'm still hungry. And then the fluorescent light over Sam's desk was buzzing all through first period. And then Sam gets a worksheet. It says, read the passage, then answer questions 3 through 5 using evidence from paragraph 2. Ooh, that's 4 cognitive steps held in mind at once. But Sam's particular working memory holds 2. So Sam did what Sam could do and put the head down because Sam's brain and Sam's body were screaming for a break. And the quietest, easiest, most accessible way to get one was to put their head down. But then Sam's there with their head down, and here's Sam start the worksheet 3 times in front of all of Sam's friends, in front of all Sam's enemies, which is even worse sometimes. And that triggered the shame on top of an already overloaded system, and that's what sent that paper across that desk. Because every one of these things asked what Sam was doing, but none of them got around to asking what happened to Sam. Okay, so you've probably been picturing Sam in your mind, and I've been trying my best to use neutral pronouns, and that's for a reason. Okay, I want you to now imagine that Sam is black. Does that change how our systems respond? And I bet since you guys are here, you're saying, yeah, no, of course not. Like, that would be horrible. But the research says something very different. The same behavior can happen, and a white student can get a counselor referral, and a black student can get an office referral. Sam, with unidentified sensory needs and executive function gaps, is now a part of that discipline pipeline. But not because Sam was more defiant, but because Sam's distress got read as a danger. So now we're going to harken back to the kid that started this. So now I want you to imagine that maybe Sam is a little girl named Maya. Maya doesn't shove the paper. Maya goes quiet. Maya passes. She holds it together all day and then falls apart the second she walks through the door at home. Nobody refers Maya for anything. Or maybe Maya gets really lucky and gets a referral to be evaluated for a 504. But she gets denied because her grades are fine. It's not affecting anything. It's not affecting academics. So the system didn't fail Maya loudly. It failed her by never noticing. And that's something that's happening to our girls all the time. So you're probably saying, who the heck is this person? Because I intentionally didn't give you much of a background. Thank you, JB, for doing that, though. I spent 15 years teaching in alternative and charter schools, and I worked primarily with the kids who had already been failed by the system in all the ways I just described. And I could never really figure out why I related to these kids so much. Until at the age of 40, I got diagnosed with autism and ADHD. So essentially, I spent my entire career trying to figure out behavior systems for brains like mine without knowing it. And maybe I look like Maya, but I've known a bunch of Sams too, and I feel like the solutions are really, really similar. So maybe you're saying, okay, this is an autism thing or an ADHD thing or a dyslexia thing. I don't have any neurodivergent kids in my class. I've heard this many times. I've heard this from my child's teacher. I've heard this from numerous teachers at trainings. And here's the thing, you most certainly do. You just don't know it. So 1 in 5 kids have dyslexia. My kids still convinced they're the only one in their school. The fact of the matter is that girls and students of color and kids from families who can't afford expensive testing are underidentified. So if you think you don't have neurodivergent kids in your class, let me tell you, we're everywhere. But here's the second point. It doesn't matter. Because asking the question, what's making this hard right now, is never the wrong question to ask any child. And children do not need to have a diagnosis to really deserve our time and curiosity to figure them out. So everything I'm going to say today rests on this one powerful idea that I talk about, I think, in every single one of the talks I give, and that's this concept of can't versus won't. So noncompliance, we normally see as defiance, right? But at the end of the day, most noncompliance is a capacity issue, not a willfulness issue. Kids don't get up in the morning and think, man, I really want to fail today. They just don't start off that way. They don't get up in the morning and think, man, if I can only make some adults really angry today, my day would be good. What's happening is they're hitting a wall, a skill wall, an energy wall, a sensory wall, an emotional wall. And the behavior we see is what happens when somebody hits a wall they can't get over. So Russell Barkley has this thing called the 30% rule. And this can apply to neurodivergent children. I want to make the caveat that sometimes we take the 30% rule and think it applies to all our executive functions. It doesn't. A kid can be very on age level, if that's even really a real thing, age level for planning and be 30% behind for task initiation. So we also have to remember as people who work with children that 14-year-old that's sitting in front of us may have the executive function skills of an almost 10-year-old. So that's really important when we're thinking about can't versus won't. So when a kid's not reaching an expectation, the first question should never be, why won't they? Even though that's the first question that comes to mind, and that's okay, that doesn't make you a bad person. But what it really should be is, what's making this hard right now? And that's the shift. That's really the whole thing. I can go now, you've gotten all you need. I'm kidding, but it's really like, it's the keystone to this whole idea, right? Behavior is communication. And when you see shutdown, refusal, meltdown, that's all data. And I know if you work in education, you're so tired of hearing behavior is communication. But it is a nervous system that's trying to tell you something. And at the end of the day, it's our job to figure out what that something is. So let's look at what the tools get wrong. And I want to be very clear here. I'm not here to bash any of these behavior systems, right? Because they all follow the same pattern. And I think it's the pattern that naturally comes to us as humans, right? We see a behavior, we assume it's a choice, and we respond to that behavior instead of what's driving this. So, zones of regulation does this. Classroom management does this. But I'm not specifically going after any one system. I'm having us rethink this pattern. So let's see how this looks in reality. We're going to look at the 4 specific gaps that these patterns have. So, number 1, and it's going to seem really odd, is calm as the goal. I'm saying that's a gap. Calm as the goal. In most school regulation programs, calm is framed as the correct state. Everything else is a problem to get out of. So if you're doing zones and you're in blue, yellow, red, those are zones you fix. Those are zones you return from. And what this teaches kids essentially is that they should perform calmness. The goal for kids, a lot of the time, especially high masking neurodivergent kids, is to perform calmness, not actually regulate. And for those kids who do mask constantly, you are adding another layer of you need to hide your real experience to make everyone around you more comfortable. And we know from research that that has very bad mental health results for those kids. And let's think about this. Calm is not always the correct state. Calm is really nice when you're teaching a class. Compliance is really nice when you're teaching a class. But what about that excited energy before the field trip when they're like bouncing off the walls? That's excited, happy energy. That's the yellow zone. And what gets across to these kids, even if zones doesn't mean it, and I don't actually think they do, is that that yellow zone is wrong and we need to get back in the calm zone. So maybe that kid is experiencing grief after losing a pet over the weekend, and their behaviors and the way they're acting and what they would report is they're in the blue zone. But wait, blue zone isn't ready to learn. So maybe if I'm in the blue zone, I shouldn't be at school. Or since I'm already here, I'm going to pretend like I'm in green. I'm going to make it look like I'm in green. And then for a lot of our spicier kids, there's that righteous anger we get when something is really unfair to one of our friends, or it's the same righteous anger as adults get when we turn on the TV and we're really angry about something going on in the world. We're in the red zone, not the red zone. Oh my gosh, we can't be in the red zone, so we try really hard to get back to green. The thing is, all those are valid human experiences and they're not problems to fix. So I feel like there's this really huge mixed messaging that goes on with kids right now where we tell them to feel their feelings and all feelings are good, but stay in the green zone. So that's confusing for them. And I'm not saying that calm is bad. I would love to be calm. I'm just saying that calm as the goal creates shame around everything else. So let's look at the second gap. And this one is a newer one for me, but it's really, really changed the way I approach my own life and approach issues that my clients are having and challenges. Um, these programs often assume that kids can accurately read their internal state. So back when Sam answered, "What zone are you in?" with the "I don't know," for a lot of neurodivergent people, that is true. That is true because a lot of us really have extremes in what's called interoception. So, for example, I don't get very loud cues from my body. So I'm on the low side. It's hard to tell when I'm thirsty. It's hard to tell when I need to go to the bathroom. It's hard to tell when I'm hungry. And maybe I feel something when I'm having an emotion, but I also don't know how to describe it and I don't know how to label it. For me, anxiety and excitement feel exactly the same way. So if you ask me how I feel when I'm in that state, I'm really not sure a lot of the time. So if you can't really feel it and nobody's catching on to that, you're just performing, right? So I've done this in therapy settings where a lot of the questions are like, where is that in your body? And I'm like, I don't want to upset this therapist. So I make something up. I make up the right answer because what a lot of people, I've done what a lot of people do, and I've like been trained on the right answer. Okay, so I guess I'm feeling anxious. So I have butterflies in my stomach. But that again is a performance, and that performance doesn't get us there. So, what do we do about it? I think I get into this a little bit more later. Kelly Mahler, the person on the bottom of my slide, is a great person to look up for more information about this. Instead of teaching kids, when you're angry, your fist gets tight, or maybe your face gets red, you should model your own feelings in front of children. And I think, especially in education, we are taught not to do that. But it's okay if you notice a child having a hard time, you can be, or an anxious moment happen in class and be like, oh, my shoulders are really tight right now. I wonder if yours are too. Or I'm noticing something's different. What's your body doing? And I'm even going to put an asterisk around that question because a lot of times if they're super dysregulated, they can't really tell you what their body's doing, but at least you're introducing the vocabulary. So already we have an interoception problem. Let's move on to number three. And number three is a question I never asked as a teacher, but something I talk with people about all day, every day, and that's energy, right? And the question we should be asking kids is, where is your battery at? So I use the example of in a video game, that life bar? Where would you put yourself on that bar? Where would you draw that bar? Because here's a fact. Being dysregulated costs an immense amount of energy. Trying to genuinely regulate costs an immense amount of energy. Masking all day costs enormous energy. And that's why these kids that are perfect in school go home and scream at their parents when their parents bring up homework, because there is nothing in that tank. And most of the programs we use are asking a kid to use a strategy when there's no gas in their tank. So that is a huge gap. We have to start asking kids about their energy and understanding that when we ask kids to perform compliance or to pretend to regulate or to remember to use strategies, we are taking from their energy bank. So for some, if they have to sit perfectly, sit quietly, use the right stance of learning, make eye contact with people. As an autistic person, I'll tell you that drains my battery down more than anything. You are making a trade-off between the kid using their energy to do those things and using their energy to learn. It's just a fact, and it's a really, really inconvenient one, but it is a fact. So gap number 4, using tools without stressor reduction. So as a former teacher and an EF coach, I think there's nothing more decisive than a fidget. I have a whole cart of fidgets. Um, and I think there's a lot of reasons for that, and I totally get it, right? My daughter informed me yesterday that kids are purposely breaking their needles at school to make a mess. And I see how that's a problem. So I want to validate that for everyone. And here's the thing, at Summit Ranch, I work really hard to match the fidgets with the child's needs. Not every fidget is perfect for everyone. So if you have one type of fidget in your calm corner, that's probably not going to do it for everyone. But there's a bigger issue here. And this OT, Tracy DeMaria, put it best. I can't improve on the way she said it, so I'm just going to read it. A fidget is not going to work in a sensory unsafe environment. It's not going to change a nervous system. So in her trainings, she talks about going in and measuring the decibels in like a normal school classroom. And they weren't like annoyingly high, they were like dangerously high. A fidget is not going to help that. The environment has to be the beginning of the intervention. So if our classrooms, and mine was a loud classroom, so if our classrooms are too loud, or I'm just going to tell on myself this whole time, or the teacher's candle wax warmer smell is giving you a headache, or those lights are too bright and buzzy, a fidget's not going to get you out of that, right? That sensory overload's still going to happen. That meltdown's going to happen. So that's why it's so important before we go into what's that behavior for, right? So if you have a kid that's trying to escape class and asking for a bathroom pass every day, before we say, what is this for? We have to say, what is this from, right? What is this from? Is there something in the environment that is making it really hard for them to stay there? Okay, so those are the gaps. And I don't have a total solution. I don't have strategies to really replace the strategies you have, but what we do have is a window to reframe, and this is something I'm trying to work on. This comes from Stuart Shanker, and even yesterday I told somebody, yeah, the problem is my window of tolerance is only this big. Hmm. I wonder what solutions I can come up with that. Oh, my window of tolerance is this big. Maybe I can figure out how to cure autism. And then my window will be bigger, right? But that's what we do when we look at kids, right? We ask, how do we make the window bigger? But maybe, just maybe, it's not the window at all. Maybe the stressors are excessive. Maybe my window feels this big because I have a lot of stress going on right now. Those stressors are more than I can handle, and that's not a flaw within myself. The window's perfectly appropriate. The demands may be unreasonable, and I think kids today have way more demands than we can even imagine. They're way more than I had going to school in the 90s. I'll say that. So the question becomes, how do we figure out what those stressors are, right? What's a way that we can decide if the stressors are excessive? That was the first question that came to my mind. I was a very data-driven teacher and I wanted a threshold for these are the stressors. This is the limit. This is when it becomes unacceptable. But here's the thing. The kids told you that already with their behavior. So, if there are behaviors, going over these 5 domains that come from Stuart Shanker is probably a really great place to start. I'll share with you a link to a folder. I actually have a handout that you can use to do this. But basically, the idea that Shanker writes about in the book Self-Reg is that there are 5 domains of stressors, right? There's the biological. So, that's sensory input. Didn't get any sleep last night. Hungry, have a headache. Those are our biological stressors. So let's say, okay, last night I had a hard time sleeping. There's a biological stressor. There's the emotional stressors, fear, anxiety, anger, grief. Let's say, oh, before I went to class, my boyfriend told me he doesn't like me anymore and wants to break up with me. Ooh, that would be a hard one on its own. But I haven't slept. I have an emotional stressor. And then I got that worksheet that had so many steps that my working memory couldn't remember it. Or maybe even worse, maybe my teacher gave me verbal directions that had like 5 steps. Forget it. Like at that point, I'm done. So, like, tasks that are too difficult for them in the first place are just info overload, like I'm giving you guys right now. So sorry. Then there are social stressors, which I think every kid has in school, right? And so that's why the redirect in front of the class was so bad for our friend Sam. So you can have like 4 stressors at once. And the one that I think really gets ignored is that pro-social stressor. So even if our kids aren't like worried about the state of the world and asking to go to harvesters and do stuff like that, they are worried about their friends. They when something bad happens to friends or family, they carry that with them, and that's the 5th stressor. And the idea here is that these stack. These are cumulative. And I think that makes sense to most of us as humans, right? I can handle 2. And sometimes life gives you 7. However, there are some we can control, right? Because you're probably sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, I work for a school. We can't control all this. And you are totally right. You are totally right. However, if you're talking to a kid about the things that might be stressful in their life right now, maybe you can't help the fact that mom and dad are getting a divorce. Maybe you can't stop them from having chronic pain. But maybe you can make sure that they're getting work that meets them where they're at, that they're getting support for those emotional stressors, that they're getting support for those pro-social stressors, and keeping that in mind before we write the referral, right? So we can stop for a second and say, you know what? We're going to give Sam a pass today. He pushed his paper off his desk. That's just him telling us that this is too much, and we're going to let him put his head down for a minute, and then we're going to talk to him. So this is how I think of it. You don't have to take my advice. This is just how I approach these things in my head. Your first step, reduce those stressors, man. Katie, turn off that wax warmer. I'm I'm sense seeking, but a lot of my kids aren't. Turn off the wax warmer. You know that Sam hates it. Lower the lights. You know that half your class is going to be so stressed out by those fluorescent lights. Change the environment. And then calm while you're reducing it. So a lot of times we'll give kids a calming strategy. I am so guilty of this. And then it's used in isolation of reducing stressors. We can give them the strategies. They're not going to work unless we reduce the stressors. So these things need to be happening basically at the same time. And the last one, which is another very inconvenient truth, is we have got to let them recover and recharge before expecting any cognitive processing to happen. You cannot make demands from kids until they've fully recovered. You can't teach them. They can't do anything complex or emotionally draining. And that's really hard because, especially neurodivergent children, the window of time it takes them to recover is not minutes. It's not. It can be hours. And for some kids, it can even be days. I have another handout in that file folder that talks about recovery time that I like to give to parents because what happens is the adrenaline from whatever the issue might be drops, and that kid looks really, really calm. And then our little buddy cortisol comes sneaking up 40 minutes later, and they're triggered again, and they're all over the place. So just know that with kids and all humans, really, except we have a developed enough prefrontal cortex to work with this. For all humans, like you're not going to be able to do the thing yet after you've been triggered, especially if it's a big emotional trigger. You're just not. So if I'm going to put this like in the shortest way possible, What you need to remember is regulations before demands always. So I'm not going to start talking to any kids that come into my office about their morning routine or let me see, what else do we do? Or that homework assignment that didn't get turned in if they're dysregulated. Because regulation has to happen first. And here's the part that I think us adults are missing because we are so tired. Um, Co-regulation has to happen before self-regulation. A dysregulated adult cannot help regulate a dysregulated child. We feed off of each other's energy. And kids are kids and they need more support with regulation. They need you to sit down next to them in a calm state. You don't even have to ask them questions. Most of the time, it's better if you don't. They just need you to be there. So, the behavior is communication. That's a Ross Green thing, not me. I love how I'm giving myself thumbs up, by the way. The behavior is communication about stressors that the kid may not even be aware of, right? So the behavior is communication. We've all heard that 1,000 times about stressors that the kid might not even be aware of because they're not getting those signals from their body that tells them this thing stresses them out. Here's the great thing, and I'm already prepared for the we're babying these kids question. What are these kids going to do when they grow up questions? I'm ready for them, so have them ready. Um, Here's the thing. I have known kids who wind up in jail. And I agree with Tracy DeMaria that it was never because we loved them and listened to them and supported them too much. I can't think of a single example where that's true. So let's get practical here. A lot of this is sort of not concrete, and I definitely wanted you guys to leave with something concrete. And I have handouts in that folder that go through the most popular behavior systems and give examples of changing your lens. So let's look at zones, right? Instead of what zones are you in? Use the strategy get to green. How about I'm noticing something's different. What do you need? And help them get what they need. Or the behavior chart. Instead of clip down, ask yourself, is this a skill gap I'm asking them to clip down for or a will gap? And if you're not sure, always assume skill. Always assume skill. Because making something too easy for a kid is never as destructive as when we punish them for something they cannot do. That is the most harmful thing you can do for a kid. And I'm going to be very honest, if there is a clip down chart in your school or your child's school, they need to come down. There's just not a great, there's no silver lining for a clip chart. I'll get into that if I have more time. Check in, check out. Instead of did you meet your behavior goals, which is kind of how I used to do it when I worked with one of these systems. Like, I see you didn't get a point here, or you didn't get a point here. What happened? You didn't meet your goal. How about what was hard today? What helped you today? What do you need tomorrow? What would you like to see again? You're going to get much different and much more helpful responses from that type of questioning. Or before you label the function as escape, because I do agree, if a kid's leaving your room, the function is escape, but ask before it, what is this behavior from? What is it from? What is happening in this kid's environment that is causing them to want and need to escape? So that's the same tool, different lens. Okay, so this is big, and I really tried to think about all these things through a teacher's perspective because I understand that sitting here in my office where I mostly see kids one-on-one, this is a lot easier for me than any of you working in schools. So I wanted to give you some levels of change that you can start working on. And the first one is just changing that lens. Let's just change what we assume. That's internal. You don't have to pay for a new curriculum. When you see a kid shut down, just think to yourself, wow, okay, they're hitting the wall here. We got to get real curious about what's going on. And that's it. That's all you have to do right now. And then once you change that lens, I think you're going to naturally realize that you're changing how you use your existing tools. So with a lot of them, not the clip charts, sorry, you can have the same structure and different questions. So zones is like that. I've heard that zones is actually working on improving the program, which is great, and including some more of the types of questions I talked about today. In the data, we can interpret data differently. Instead of looking at what is this kid doing wrong, let's check the data. What's going on here? What are the patterns we see, and what useful, productive solutions can that lead us to? And then level three, if you are really brave, you can start that conversation with your school about how public tracking doesn't belong in your building or any building, because here's what public tracking does. I'm going to go ahead and say it. So when we have like clip down boards, I think I used to write like lines on the board. They were for things kids did good, but still, Um, what you're actually doing does nothing for the individual kid who's showing the behavior. What you're doing is showing the rest of the class, like, this is our example, and we're going to make an example of them. And at the end of the day, that is tying someone's dignity to their behavior, which they might not have control of. So you might be taking a kid who's already down and taking that piece of dignity from them and expecting that to make them behave better just is not going to work out. Okay? So, if that type of system's in your school, I would love for you to be brave, but it's not everybody's job. But please advocate for some stressor first approaches. So, at the end of the day, what I'm telling you is this lens is totally free. It's totally free to respond with curiosity. It's totally free to decide that kids aren't waking up in the morning deciding they want to make your day really bad. It's really easy to think, oh, they're hitting a wall, like they're being pushed too hard right now. Um, and at the end of the day, what I tell people is looking at things this way opens up a world of possibilities, right? It opens up a world of possibilities for interventions. It makes these problems that feel so unsolvable. Little Johnny won't do it. Well, little Johnny, like, has a hard life and he won't do it, or little Johnny just hates school, he'll never do it, he won't do it. This is a way to go from that to go, okay, so we have these 5 domains to work with. How can we think about these puzzle pieces to make things for little Johnny a little easier to stay regulated and have behaviors that can keep him in school? I'm always going to choose that path instead of sitting around trying to figure out what's wrong with little Johnny. Okay, so just remember that this child is not giving you a hard time, they're having a hard time. And that's a Ross Greene quote. I'm not going to take that as my own. I'm going to show you really quickly the folder I set up and what's in it because I think I have some time. So if you can go, I'll put it back up, but when you go to the QR code, it should take you to this handy dandy little folder. There's these try this handouts. So these go over the most popular behavior management systems in schools and gives you something to try instead, right? And I don't mean instead of the whole system. I mean better first questions or ways to make it more aligned in a neurodiversity affirming approach. The other thing in here is the stressor mapping handout I was talking about. What I would probably do as a teacher is I would make a lot of these things a part of that beginning of the year survey, right? So, like a lot of teachers, a lot of counselors, when you first meet kids, you give them that survey and you can work these things in there really nicely, especially like that sensory stuff, because those are kind of like interesting questions to ask kids. They can be kind of fun because you can model it. Like, I'm always like, ooh, when they come and they're experimenting with the fidget card, I'm always like, ooh, oh, I hate this. I hate the way this feels, or these lights are too bright. And they really have a good time with that. Or I go, oh my goodness, my brain loves this one. I don't know why. My brain loves this one. Which one does your brain like? So those are actually kind of fun questions to add to your surveys. I wouldn't ask them about like their deep emotional family stuff on a survey, but a lot of these you can work in. So this will kind of help you see in front of your face, how many domains do these kids have active stressors in right now, and which ones can we shift? It's not going to be all of them, but it will be some of them, and you can at least make them a little more tolerable. So that's stressor mapping. I included a PDF of this presentation, my works cited, all the people whose work I really like to follow. Um, there's an environmental audit checklist. If you do work with a lot of neurodivergent students, especially, um, this is a good thing for yourself to do. Or I like to do a lot of like, would you rather? So, would you rather have really bright light or really dim light on surveys? So, but you yourself can kind of do a checklist like, is your lighting soft or natural, or is it bright? What's the noise level like? What kind of visual clutter is there? And it pains me to say this because I was kind of a Pinterest teacher. Sometimes we take that too far, and visual clutter can be a stressor. So, that's also something to look out for. Um, Cognitive demands. If you guys are counselors, maybe you can't like check this as much, but this is a good thing to introduce to teachers as well. So, like, how are their instructions written? Are they just verbally giving instructions? Are they breaking them down into small enough steps? Are there too many steps? Are they aware of how many steps their particular kids can hold at one time? Is a really good thing to look for. Um, I'm looking for the ones my kids have. Oh, recovery time is built in after high demand activities and not as a reward. So the thing about schools is that we love to give things as rewards, right? We let them do the fun thing if they earn that reward. We let them have that break if they've been working hard. When really most of the time those things should be automatic, if not the opposite, right? So the issue I'm seeing, especially with teenagers, is there's zero recovery time. They're going from one AP class to another AP class to another AP class to whatever hobby they're in because they're trying to get to college, to homework, and they literally have no downtime. And even younger kids, I'm starting to see this in. We are overscheduling our kids. I'm sorry if that's not popular opinion, but kids are not getting enough downtime, especially after their high demand activities. So that needs to be necessary. And my biggest tip, that's probably the most controversial, do the fun thing first. That's going to give a lot of kids the dopamine they need to get through the hard thing. Just try it. With some kids it'll work, some kids it won't. Do the fun thing first. Um, and I think all schools kind of have a responsibility for this emotional safety piece, and we need to take that more seriously. So making sure our teachers know not to do these things, making sure that there's one adult in that space that kid trusts. It breaks my heart. One of the first things I ask my clients is there an adult in your school that you trust and feel comfortable talking to? And a lot of them say no. So that's a really, really hard place for them to be in. So I highly suggest an environmental audit. Even when I was a geography teacher, I had kids take a map of the school and mark the places they felt most comfortable in and the places they felt least comfortable in. That was interesting. Again, I taught alternative school, so it's not as odd as you might think. And the last thing in your folder is a copy of my handout on recovery. And it's such bad news for so many parents, but sometimes your child will need hours and not minutes to recover after a meltdown. And that's just scientific fact. Our babies aren't robots. So that's what I had to share with you. And I'm ready for questions. Hmm, let's see.
Okay, so the first question we have, they want to know if there's a similar training available for parents.
Ooh, well, I can make one for sure.
Okay,
So,
guys. So she said she could do
um, that's kind of how I operate. I like to find the gaps and fill them. So, yes, I can do that. So, I've actually like kind of switched this training from what I talk to parents about. So, my advice would be to, I don't want to sound like I'm doing an advertisement, but go on Summit Ranch and get added to our mailing list because when I send out the newsletter, it'll have all our trainings that we have coming up.
So somebody was wondering if by any chance you could please share the QR code again. And then
Oh,
somebody else
yeah.
was asking, can you tell us a little bit about your organization?
Well, sure. And my working memory is abysmal, my friend. So thank you for reminding me about the QR code. Let's see. Share. Okay, so Summit Ranch is located in Western Shawnee. If you are Kansas people and near Shawnee, you might know the property as the old Defenbaugh Estate. So we're located on 100 acres. Um, there's a big fun mansion for kids to play in. We have horses and chickens and cats and walking trails. And I started the executive function program here because I saw that as a gap that desperately needed to be filled. And I really wanted to contribute to Summit Ranch and the mission of getting affordable mental health care out to the community. I was a teacher, so I thought, wow, I could do executive function coaching and that'll be nice and clean. And really, you can't address executive function without touching on deep, deep emotions. So I'm actually really happy I started my social work program. Um, we have, I'm trying to think of what we have going on right now. We have one-to-one EF coaching, ADHD coaching. We have one-to-one clinical therapy. We have groups. I have a neurodivergent preteen group. We are working on an ADHD group for parents. So I can make sure our new therapist, we just got a new third clinician, so that's great, is going to be doing an ADHD parents group in May, I believe. And I will be at your guys' conference in May.
That is true. Okay. So somebody was asking, what is a clip chart?
Oh,
And
so,
then the other question that has to do with this, do you have a replacement for teachers
okay.
instead of a clip
So
chart?
a clip chart is a chart where there's colors and the kids have their names written on these clips. So everybody starts out on green, and as you go on through the day, if you misbehave, you have to go clip down, they call it. So you have to get up in front of everybody and clip down. So it's sort of like a very public way to show that you're misbehaving, but the outcome, I think, is more of shame. And systems like that don't recognize things that make behavior harder for children. They just try to shame them into it, which is a really, I mean, fast way to get children to comply, but it's not the best for mental health. And so it's, I would say to not track kids' behavior in that way at all. The closest thing that I would endorse really strongly is maybe I've worked at places where they do have that little card where you can like earn points, right? So like if you got 5 points, you were doing incredible that day. I still don't love that, but I think it's good data for having a good conversation. So I almost wish it wasn't about points because the issue I had at the school I worked at was that a lot of teachers made it so the kids weren't earning points, they were losing points. So there's nothing about being punished in that way that helps you regulate, right? Regulation is our goal. And the biggest thing for teachers to do is that lens shift, and it's going to help you understand quickly whether the things you're doing are helpful or not. So I look back on some things that I've done, like I used to give kids raffle tickets, and it could have been worse, but like I don't know if I was always rewarding behaviors that some of the kids in the room were capable of. So In alternative school, I gave them away pretty liberally, and the kids really liked it because they always got punished by these systems. So it's not that black and white. Like they really loved it because finally I'm getting these stars, but I wish I had been more intentional about making sure that I was including behaviors that were easier for some of those kids. But now I can't give you like a lovely teachers pay teachers file. That's going to be the perfect thing.
Okay, so what hold on. And could you, if you could post your whole question, because it came out into very different um messages, that would be awesome. So the certificate link will work. It has to do with how many people are trying to get on at once. And so please save the password and save the link. And I promise within 30, 40 minutes, you'll probably be able to get on. It's just when everybody's trying to do it at once, it makes it so that it the link like kind of crashes and won't work. Okay, so two questions. How do you work with African American kids to help them when the world sees them different and treats them different, as well as educating parents to work with them?
Okay, that is a really, really good question that I've never been asked before. At the beginning of my career, the schools I worked at were 99% African American. There's a lot of things I did during that point in time that I wish I hadn't done. But the one thing I feel like I got right was not pretending like those things don't exist. Those are massive, massive stressors that those kids are going through, especially boys who look like grown men when they're children, right? So I don't think trying to have toxic positivity around those things is very helpful. I think it's more helpful to acknowledge that stressor and take down the other ones as much as you can. So, you know what? If I was always the teacher, if a kid's hungry, you feed them. If I had one kid who didn't like the sound of markers, so I bought him crayons. So there are things you can control and things you can't control. We can't pretend like the things we can't control aren't there. We have to acknowledge them. And I think we have to acknowledge them verbally for those kids.
Okay, thank you. So, quick question and quick answer. Somebody asked us, is there going to be a recording of this presentation? Yes. It'll be available actually through our YouTube. So, Tracy, yes, there will be a recording. And then another question was, how do you get buy-in from other adults? So, they're a social worker at an elementary school, but not all teachers are willing to do the work to help their students. Like you said earlier, reducing the stressors. We practice deep breathing and replacement strategies in my office, but that doesn't translate um, out in their classrooms when there's also stressful places.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to be honest, there's a reason I don't work in schools anymore. Um, you, I mean, I don't know how much power you have as a social worker. Um, what I would hope would be the natural thing, but in my experience was not, is that teachers would see how these things work and go, oh, I want to try that. But at the end of the day, there are some teachers who really just want that compliance. And so much of the school system culture is a quiet classroom is a good classroom. I couldn't disagree more. In my experience, not all the time a classroom's quiet, but if you walk by somebody's room every single day, no matter what time of day, and it's drop dead quiet in there, that's a scary thing, but schools make it seem like that's the goal. So I think a lot of teachers feel pressured into this. So it's a higher systemic issue. Um, I would find a school that's on board with your mission. There's also a reason why I worked in alternative schools. My husband's the principal of an alternative school, so that's nice. Maybe you could be a principal and then you have more control over the way these things work. But honestly, like that is $1 million question, and I don't know the answer to it. And I hope that you're practicing self-care and taking care of yourself. You can't do everything.
Okay, so the next question, um, let's see. Um, okay. Do you know someone who provides services with neurodivergent kids in Spanish?
Ooh, I don't. I don't. So if any of you are students out here, thinking about going into counseling or social work, please, 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 please specialize in ADHD, specialize in autism, learn about dyslexia. The need is really, really great. At Summit Ranch, we have a pretty extensive wait list, and we were hoping that did not happen. But it is really, really hard to find neurodivergent affirming support. Whether kids, it's even worse for adults. So I just beg of you, if you are in school, if this is something you're interested in, dig deep because it's an endless wait list right now.
Okay, so the next question is, what are some recommended strategies for students who are diagnosed with ADHD and really struggle to follow classroom expectations because they can't? Not that they don't want to. The student I'm thinking of blurts out constantly, has difficulty staying in his desk area, completing assignments, and responding to the teacher respectfully. To me, it would be you suggest a change in environment, allows novelty and movement,
Hmm.
may give both the student and the teacher a break from one another as their relationship is being negatively impacted.
What a good thing to notice that relationship. So people ask me questions like this, and the answer is always it depends. It depends. Like these kids, you really need to get to know them in the back of their hand. Like this sounds like he needs to move, right? So the baseline I would ask for would be that every school has a standing desk at least. If not, I don't have them right here. Oh, yes, I do. If not, have kick bands, things that allow them to move. I would love to not have to run into schools that don't allow fidgets. Lots of schools are starting to, which is great. And it's okay to have boundaries with those things. Your fidget should be quiet. You should be able to hold it in your hand, and essentially nobody should know you have it. It sounds like movement breaks would be good for him. And I don't know. Why is he blurting out? Like my question is like what's happening there? Are you blurting out because you're super excited? Then the response should be like, wow, like I love how excited you are. Uh, but sometimes that gets distracting for me. So I'm gonna circle back around to that. Like you really want to take the shame out of these things because these kids with ADHD are redirected like hundreds, maybe thousands of times more than your average kid, and that weighs on them, and it only really makes the problem worse. Shame does not create change. Um, but I would really get to know that kid inside and out and what's going on at the time these behaviors are happening. And also, like, just validate, like, there's nothing weird that you behave this way. Like, that's what your brain is wired to do. You're wired to move, you're wired to get excited and want to say things. That's okay. And you're going to get in trouble. So let's try to figure out a way that works for you. And it is so different for all of them.
Okay, so a couple other questions, and guys, I apologize. I know we're over time, but I know people had lots of questions. Okay, so this is a quick one. They wanted to know, you were talking about like specializing, and you said specializing in autism, ADHD, and then what was the third one?
Ooh, dyslexia.
Dyslexia.
Because
Okay,
people think
thank you.
dyslexia just affects reading, and it doesn't. It affects a lot of things. So I'm going to be honest because it can't be anything but. You see a lot of people on Psychology Today clicking all the boxes. So I'm going to tell you, it is not appropriate to click the boxes for autism and ADHD unless you have taken like extra coursework in those things. So extra CEUs, extra trainings, honestly, I find a lot of the trainings designed for parents to be just as valuable as a clinician as they are as a parent. I would vet those programs though, because you're going to run into things that are based on the medical model of disability, which this could be a whole nother presentation, but you're going to see things that are based on this medical model that says, these kids are broken and they need to be fixed, and these are the ways to fix them. And a lot of those programs were not based off of actual neurodivergent experience. So you want to look for programs that are outwardly and advertising that they are neurodivergence affirming. That would be my big guidance. ADCA's coaching program has a few really, really good classes about ADHD. They are pretty expensive. If you want to dip your toes into some things, I'd go to the Attitude website. They have webinars every week that are free, and they tend to be very, very, very good. And I found I've gotten a lot of very useful information about that.
Okay, so I know that there's still some people that are asking about the link for certificate. I just talked with the person who oversees that. They did say it is working. That it's just so many people are trying to get it at once that that is why like it's probably working for a couple people and not for others. So that's why it's really important to save the link, save the password because it will work. You just need to give it some time. And if everybody's trying to get on all at once, it's not working. Okay, so last couple questions. Does your location offer tours for professionals?
Yes, yes, we
Okay.
do. We have bi-weekly tours. If you like own a group practice or something like that, or you want or have we've given tours to school counselors before, you should email info@Summit Ranch and we can get that scheduled. If you are just like the average everyday person on the street, we have bi-weekly tours when we can. We are a fierce and mighty staff of four now, so but they're offered regularly.
Okay. And then are you allowed to share this information data with juvenile facilities?
I'm not sure what that means.
That was good.
I mean,
Uh,
I will share learning with anyone, so.
okay. And
And
okay.
that would be
And
a good
then
one because the rates of kids that end up in those facilities and in jail are extremely high, especially for ADHD and dyslexia.
what was the name of the free resource?
Oh, it's the Attitude website, ADDITUDE.
And then the last thing, what can we do to help schools stop criminalizing these kids for these extreme behaviors?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. This is kind of what I'm doing now that I'm out of it. I do think it's easier for people who are outside of the school system to advocate. Um, I think you should, gosh, I haven't had this question before, so I'm really thinking about it. I do a lot of advocacy myself. So if you work with kids, I do think it would be valuable to learn about things like IEPs and 504s. So you can have a seat at the table to educate administrators and counselors who are in charge of those things about what things like neurodivergence actually looks like, because I don't think they have an accurate representation in schools at all. You can complain when your own kid. I have complained to my child's principal about clip down charts before. Um, and, don't be afraid to be that fierce parent. Always come with collaboration in mind. So I'll make a complaint and then I'll buy them some cookies. and thank them during teacher week. I think that's really important, but you got to be loud. And I find with school districts, you have to be loud in public because a lot of the stuff in private will get just swept under the rug.
And then any tips for helping kids that cannot articulate how they are feeling, what they need due to processing disorder?
This is my new obsession because doing these activities with kids has helped my own interoception um, in processing. I'd be very careful. She does have some adaptations in here for if you like are, I don't want to say overly sensitive, but you know what I mean, like sensitive to things versus not sensitive to things. But here's the short and skinny of it. You have kids do experiments. And so it's kind of fun, right? So my one, you start with your hands before you move into your internal um, experiences. So like I'll be like, all right, we're both going to hold a piece of ice and we're going to see who can hold it the longest without stopping. And I'm always the one to stop first. And I'll be like, oh, it burns my hand. And making that connection that you are trying to feel what's happening in your hand. Because here's what I would do in the past with these activities. And when I started to work here, like we're very somatic and stuff, I would describe how the thing feels, right? Like, oh, it's like hard metal, not how my hand feels. And when I had to make that switch, I realized I don't really have words for that. But that's something that can come with practice, and their answers are never wrong. So I could be like, this feels like the rolling wheels of a train. Wonderful. Rolling wheels of the train. Like she'll even go towards like, don't even have the feelings charts necessarily be words. You can write a descriptors chart and they could be like, that feels like the totally deflated duck to me. And that counts. So hopefully that.
Okay, guys. Well, thank you all so much. I'm sorry that we stayed on after, but I wanted to make sure we got all your questions answered. Everybody said thank you, thank you, thank you. They loved it.
Guys,
Yeah, they said it was fantastic, one of the best they've been to. So, thank you, and I hope
thank
everybody has a great rest of your day.
all right. Thank
Thank
you.
you all. Have a great day, great weekend, hopefully great spring break.
I miss those. Bye.
Thank you guys. Bye.